So the Long Table is an open source project by artist Lois Weaver, and it's meant to inspire open-ended conversation on difficult topics around the familiar environment of a dinner table. The Long Table has a home all year here at the Rubin, and it's planned with impromptu talks and some planned talks. And this year, if you haven't already noticed, we're exploring the theme of power. So we have invited several organizations and individuals to host long table conversations on topics that are important to them. So Lois Weaver, creator of the Long Table, gave us some guidelines for today, and these are very important. You can read through them on your menu, and there's one in front of each of you. I'm going to read through them now with all of you. All right. There is no beginning. It is a performance of a breakfast, lunch, or a dinner. Anyone seated at the table is a guest performer. Talk is the only course. No one will moderate, but a host may assist you. It is a democracy. To participate, simply take an empty seat at the table. If the table is full, you can request a seat. If you leave the table, you can come back again and again. Feel free to write your comments on the tablecloth, which is this paper here. Right. There can be silence. There might be awkwardness. There could always be laughter. And there is no end. There is an end, actually, but no conclusion. All right. So I'm your timekeeper for today during our hour-long conversation. I will step in when needed, but will primarily turn it over to all of you. So I'll also invite you to keep in mind the concept of step up and step back. If you feel like you or frequently have time to speak, consider letting somebody else take a seat. If you feel like you don't usually speak up, I invite you to be brave. Okay? Please note that we will be taking video, no photography, but on this morning's session. And if you prefer not to appear in photos or video, please raise your hand and we'll provide you with a purple sticker. Okay? Also, when it's your time to speak, I'd just like to note, please be quick about introducing yourself, say your name, say who you are, but try not to go into a monologue because we only have an hour here. Okay. All right, I'm going to turn the conversation over to you, Iana.
The reason that we're having this conversation, because it is a conversation today, is I'm new to this yoga wellness world. So most of you know that I work full-time also in news. So that's my main job. The first thing I noticed about when we got into this spiritual world, everyone does this because they love it. They don't do it for money. They don't do it for fame. It's like a thing that they have to do. And that was the thing that was just, it blew me away, the passion, the excitement. We also live in a real world situation. We have to pay our rent, we have to pay our bills, so then it gets a little sticky. So these conversations about money, power, how do we work around them? So that's our theme today. How do we deal with money in a world of spirituality and wellness? How do we live in this world, balance these two things? How do we talk about money in a way that's comfortable? How do we ask for money? You know, there's a lot of things there's just not talked about. So I really want to turn it over to you guys because you guys have been doing this way longer and have way more knowledge. So this is a selfishly motivated thing right now. So just feel free to just start talking about things, anything you feel could help other people, new teachers especially. I think this was sort of prompted by a conversation with a newer teacher with a more senior teacher, sort of learning what opportunities were out there and what payment structures also existed. So those are part of the things that we do want to talk about at some point today, but you know, what advice would sort of the teachers that have been around a little bit longer give to like a newer teacher in terms of dealing with this situation? Just start talking, don't worry about it.
A few years ago, my Ashtanga yoga teacher said something interesting. He said, we train to have power over ourselves. And it tied into a way Leonardo da Vinci phrases it. He says, we train to have mastery of our own mind. And when we start going out there and we start to, like doing, the corporate work is very important. Like when you train and you turn to your practice, it's a consolidation of power within our bodies. And that is palpable. So I think sometimes we veer off the balance of personal practice and sharing. We can get caught too much on the business side before we have that Shakti, when you talked about, Alyssa, surrender. I think what we're surrendering is those weaker lower drives within us or our fears and sucking the power of the mantras, the eternal teachings into us so that they're there vibrationally, so that when you walk into an office and you pitch, it's important work. These are influential people. I train celebrities and movie stars and people who run the world in the corporate world. These are the people we want these teachings to influence because it'll trickle down in terms of the decisions they make. But we have to realize, especially when you're starting out in a teacher training, be very rhythmic, very disciplined about your own practice so that you don't have to sell externally so much as they're like, what vibe are you on? Because it's building consolidation of energy within yourself, and it comes through in your eyes, your posture, and then the sell is like, it happens after. So I've gotten to a point where when I was 20, I started doing this in college at age 20 as a sophomore, and then I made it my real job as a senior because I got depressed at the real jobs. I went on interviews, and that's the only time I've ever been depressed. I stayed in bed for 30 days because I'm like, I can't do this corner office thing with my life. And then over time, I've gotten to a really high rate and doing my own training now and getting organized to the point where I want to share it in a system is deep, deep personal work. So we have to always remember to come back to that surrender the lower drive, surrender the fear, surrender your life's pain, the way others have hurt you, so that it shines from inside out.
There was an expression that a business coach told me one day, and it says, when you thrive, your business thrives. And I realized, holy shit, I'm not taking care of myself. I'm constantly worried about cash flow. I'm constantly worried about what everyone else is making and how they perceive me. And do they perceive me as fair? And do they perceive me as greedy? Do they get that I'm making no money and I'm accumulating debt day after day after day? Because the studio's just beautiful. So it looks prosperous. But so when I realized that my fear was driving my desires to grow, that was a moment where I was like, oh, I need to go inward here, and I need to look at this differently. And the more I started looking at my own inner landscape and my own conditioning, the more able I was to be vulnerable and to be authentic and to have difficult conversations with money when teachers would ask me for more money, and I would say, okay, so let's look at these numbers. I'm going to show. I am so transparent with all my numbers with all my teachers if they ask, and that transparency and that ability to be vulnerable and say, this is what I can do. I have teachers that work with me for 10 years, for the whole time. And so when we're able to communicate just truthfully, it goes very far. And so the more I was able to do that, to really get authentic, the more successful I found the whole thing.
One of the conflicts that I have is about access, right? Like when we first started, our pricing was substantially lower than it is today. And a lot of that was based on this feeling of like, well, we want to make sure that people have access to our space. But as a result of that, that was shrinking, of course, our own personal income. And we are, mom and pop, like we live off of our business, actually. And also the ability for us to fairly compensate instructors. And so now we're probably one of the highest priced. It's $25 to drop into our studio. And I feel a lot better about our pricing being significantly higher than other studios because we really can then have our instructors as employees. If we hadn't done that, we really couldn't do that. And I know that that's true nationally. This is a national level problem. So I guess I just wanted to contribute that I think that there's a really big question that we collectively need to answer about the prices that we charge and the way that comes back to instructors and who we're really allowing access to based on, pricing our services below what they actually cost. I think across the board that there's not a lot of profit. I know within the wellness industry, there's about a 20% profit margin. So in order to bring in $10,000 a month, you have to probably bring in about $50,000 to your studio for the people running the show. So I just want to propose that part of the problem that we need to talk about here is how we collectively price things, because it was hard for me to say these are really the real fair prices when around me, the nearest studio is 18 to drop in.
But one of the things I've been brainstorming about is that, how can there be an additional revenue stream to the, and congratulations on everybody who's been successful with their great studio so far, but I think that there are times during the day when they're not attractive to have classes, and there's an opportunity to repurpose that space and to collaborate with some other healing modalities. So Ayurveda was one idea that comes to mind. It could be an Ayurvedic health coach or a physician, or workshops, and people could pay for just coming to a workshop and learning about the lifestyle, et cetera, or some of the strategies.
I also came from corporate. I guess that's the path, right? And I had to get over, so I'm a sole proprietor, so it's just me teaching meditation. So I don't teach yoga, just meditation. And I felt that that was a little bit harder of a sell as my only product, as it were. But
I too chose not to have a studio and to go directly to corporate because the overhead was so high. The overhead was too much. I like the mobility where I can, take my show on the road, so to speak. But to your point, also with the additional revenue streams, we're still often, or I'll speak for myself, trading the dollars for hours, right? It's that direct correlation where if I'm not working, I'm not getting paid. For me, I started working with the essential oils. I started writing a book, like trying to find other revenue streams, the more passive income, because there is, I don't want to say there's a ceiling to what I can charge, but there's a limit to what the market will bear, right? And so if I want to be able to take those vacations, I was realizing that I need to have some other opportunities other than just it being me, if I need this to be scalable.
I've always been a teacher's teacher and a lot of mentoring of new yoga teachers. That became a lot of my focus too, because let's be honest, there's a lot of studios that are pumping out new teachers like Tic Tacs, and they cannot teach. And they show up to my space, and as a senior teacher, I think it's my responsibility to make them teachers, because they showed up really excited with a little piece of paper, and they really want to teach. So I'm now transitioning my own personal business model to being a mentor. My long-term goal is, okay, by 50, I want to keep this studio going. I want a brand new studio, and I want to get out of corporate and do that leap, but be able to have enough income coming in where I can sustain it, because my greatest pleasure is taking that student and evolving them into a fantastic teacher, because we need really good teachers out there. We don't need plenty, we need quality.
Look at our country today. Transparency is so not there, like at so many levels. So we could actually be somewhat of a spearhead in the movement for transparency, unity, community, and honesty, and like doing that inner work to get to that place. It's really powerful, and I think we have that. Just what I've seen here, I'm just really, inspired by who's here and what I've heard today.
I mean, I think the power really comes from shining that light and having the yogis who come to practice with you learning something about themselves.
Teaching yoga and being a yogi is not a corporate ladder. Just because you are a good yogi, and we'll say good relatively, you don't deserve a studio. It's not a right. It may be the more responsible thing to not open your studio or to close your studio or maybe partner with another studio, because at the end of the day, I did not become a yogi or teach yoga to become a business owner, right? And I think more and more there's too much emphasis put on students to invest into our studios so that we could pay the rent. And I don't know, even as a practitioner, What am I getting out of the workshops? Am I paying $500 so that you could pay your rent? I feel bad that your rent is high. I want to support your investment. But what is the teaching? And I think there needs to be more emphasis put on the teachings, again, the quality of the teachers, the quality of the workshops. I won't even get started on what a teacher training program looks like, which is, to me, it's pretty exploitative and it's gross and it's irresponsible on our part to keep shooting out teachers and giving them 200-hour teacher trainings and convincing them they're going to be able to teach. And the whole industry is diluted, and we need to take responsibility for putting value back into that. And in the political climate that we're in, stop trying to transcend what's happening in the world by saying we're spiritual. We need to be responsible, and we need to show as a community and as an industry that what we teach and what we've learned and what we've invested in has an impact on the quality of society and our life. And I think it's more important to do that than to continue working on branding and marketing and Instagram and pictures and spandex, because all that, ready, is trash. Everything is temporary. And we really need to focus on what is eternal, which are our teachings and why we're all still here struggling and sacrificing, right?
Being authentic and constantly doing your own work and peeling away the onion and learning your biases, doing the work, so that the people that step in the mat in front of you can see themselves in you and see where that connection is, soul to soul, versus the shape, the color, the size, the age. And then I think that can be your superpower, right? Teaching you to be authentic and being perfectly okay with being perfectly imperfect. Because it's tough out there, and they showed up for a reason. So we have a responsibility to show up for them.
Thank you, New York Yoga and Life, for bringing the topic to the table. It's been an amazing conversation.